G'day lads, in this video I'll show you how to project a player's rebounds using Excel. If you want to download this model and improve your sports modeling skills, then make sure you click the first link in the description below to become an official Excel lad. So the first step in building the rebound model, lads, is getting the data, and we need 4 types of data imported to Excel through a Power Query. The first is going to be per game player stats from the website Basketball Reference. The second is going to be NBA team possessions per game from Team Rankings. And 2 more pages we need from the Team Rankings website include the NBA team offensive rebounding percentage and the NBA team defensive rebounding percentage. So these 4 links are in the description of this video. So when you're building the Excel Lads NBA rebound model, make sure you import those links into Excel using a Power Query. Now go to cell AG2 on the worksheet with the NBA per game player stats and put the text players, and underneath that in cell AG3 put the formula equals B3, absolute referencing both the row and the column by putting a $ in front of the B and 3. Now under it in AG4 we're putting a long formula. It's going to be equals if open bracket, if the offset function open bracket, B3 is the reference cell, the number of rows is the row function, open bracket, close bracket, -3, comma, 0, close bracket equals 0, then return speech mark, indicating nothing. If not, return another offset function. Open bracket, B3 is the reference cell, absolute reference that, row function, open bracket, close bracket, -3, comma, 0, and then 2 closing brackets to finish the formula. Press enter on that, and then drag this down to cell AG1000. This column collects the list of players in the NBA per game player stats dataset, and it's just the first step of cleaning the data so that when we make the final dashboard and choose a player to project their rebounds, we're able to get a unique list of players and not have to repeat any players that have been traded throughout the season. Now in cell AH2, put the header number of teams, and here I'm going to enter the formula equals if open bracket, then I'm going to use the len or length function, len, open bracket, and then $AG3 so that we only reference the column in AG. Close the bracket, greater than 0. Then if that's true, return another if function. That's going to be if AG3, again, only referencing the column AG, is equal to $AG2. Then return 0. If not, return another if function, open bracket, if AG3 is equal to the text player, then return 1. And if it's not, return yet another if function, and that's going to be if, open bracket, len, open bracket, AG3, close bracket, greater than 0. Then return if, open bracket, count if, open bracket, the range B3 to B3000, absolute referencing both the column and the row, so $ in front of the B and 3 in both instances. And the criteria for that is AG3, $ in front of the AG. And if that's equal to 1, return 1. If not, return another countif function where it's going to be a range of B3 to B3000 again, and a criteria of AG3. So type that out, and then once you put the criteria as AG3, close the bracket, subtract 1, and then close the bracket 4 times. 4 closing brackets, then return speech mark, indicating nothing, close the bracket and press enter, and then you're going to drag this formula down to AH1000. And you can do that really quickly by double-clicking the bottom right-hand corner of the cell. In AI2, put the column header current team, and then in this column I'll return what team each player in column AG is currently on. If the stat for that row was for another team, then I'm going to return the text ignore. So the formula for that is equals if error, open bracket, I'm going to put in an if function, and I'm going to say if $AH3 is greater than 1, then return an offset function within an offset function, where the reference cell is E3, absolute referenced, and the number of rows is the row function, open bracket, close bracket, -3, and 0 columns. Close that bracket, comma, $AH3, comma 0, close bracket, comma, another if function, open bracket. If AH3 equals 1, then return an offset function where E3 is the reference cell. The number of rows going down is the row function, minus 3 and 0 columns. Close the bracket there, comma, if function, if AH3 equals 0, then return the text ignore. Otherwise, return 2 speech marks, and that's nothing, as I mentioned a minute ago. Close 3 brackets there, comma, 2 speech marks again, close the bracket, and when you press enter, you can drag this formula down to AI 1000. And once you've done that, lads, I can select the whole worksheet and then center the text to make it look a bit better and neater. And then in AF2, I'm going to put the column header player number. And in this column, I'm just going to return a unique number for each player. If their text is ignore in the column AI, then they won't get a number, so that each player gets exactly one number. So in AF3, just put equals 1, and the formula in AF4 is equals if, open bracket, the length function, len, open bracket, AI4 is the text. If that's equal to 3, then return the max of the range AF3 to AF3. The first AF3, you have to absolute reference both the column and row, but don't do that for the second AF3. Close bracket, +1, comma, 2 speech marks, and then close the bracket again, press enter, and then I'll drag this down to AF 1000. And so you'll see that a player only gets a unique player number if the length of the text in column AI is 3, that is, there's a current team on that row. So now go over to cell AK2 and type in the text unique players. And then in this row, we're just going to return all the players that are unique in this data set. So the formula for that is equals if error, open bracket, VLOOKUP, open bracket, and our lookup value is the row function -2, comma, the table array is AF3 to AI 3000. Make sure to absolute reference both the column and row for this. The column index number's 2 and the range lookup is false. So close the bracket there, and then if there's an error, return 2 speech marks. Close the bracket and press enter, and then drag this down to AK 1000. And so once I do that, you'll see a list of blank values below because we don't have 1000 unique plays in the data set. And then when the data set loads, I can see that the unique plays come up. So Precious, Spam, Achai, all the way down to the last NBA player in the 2023-24 NBA player stats data set. Now in AL2, put the text team, and in this column, we're returning the player's team. So that's if error, VLOOKUP, row function -2 is the lookup value. The table array is going to be AF3 to AI 3000 again, but this time the column index number is 4 because we're returning the 4th column in this array, the current team, and the range lookup is false. Close the bracket, comma, 2 speech marks, close bracket, press enter. So we get the Knicks there, double click, and then that goes down to AL 1000. So now we've got our unique players, their team. What we have to do next in AN2 is write the text player count. And then beside that in AO2, we need to put a formula to return the number of unique plays in our list. So to do that, put equals max, open bracket, and then it's going to be A3 to A1000. That's the first column of the NBA per game player stats data set to the left here. And that's just going to return the number of players, 535. So now what we're going to do is name the range of players so that we can reference it later on. So go into the formulas tab, click on name manager or the equivalent, and then here I'm going to click the new button. The name is going to be players. Once you write that in, down below next to refers to, we need to put our range. So the players range is going to go from AK3, the first player here, Precious, and then do a :2, and then the range is going to be dynamic and it's dependent on the number of players in the data set. We need to use an offset function, open bracket. The reference cell is going to be AK3, and the number of rows we're going to go down from that cell is the player count in AO2, 535, -1. And then we're going 0 columns, so comma 0, Close that bracket and then press OK. And then now we have a range named players, so that when we create the drop-down list in our final dashboard, we can just do equals players. And lads, my next step is going to be creating a new worksheet and naming it team names. In here, I'm going to have 3 columns to match all 30 NBA teams up with the 3 different names they can take on in this model. The first column will be the 3-letter team ID they're given in the NBA per game player stats worksheet. So put the text team ID in A1. In cell B1, put the header teams, and this is just the team's full name as found on the NBA website. And then in C1, put the text team rankings names. These are what the teams appear as in the pace dataset, as well as the offensive and defensive rebound percentage datasets below. If I go into the NBA player stats worksheet, the list of 3-letter team IDs in column AL is what's going to appear in the first column, and then in the third column, team rankings names from the pace worksheet, that's in column B there. So if I go back into team names, the way I'm going to get this data into this worksheet is just by manually entering it in. So you can pause this video when all the data's in and then copy it in. Otherwise, you could use a combination of unique functions or other series of formulas to pull these in to Excel using the worksheets in the file. But yeah, I'm matching up team ID in column A to a team in column B, and then to the teams in column C. So I'm going to put the last Brooklyn in, and then I'm going to name the range B2 to B31. That's the team full names, and I'm going to name that teams. So select that range, go up to the top left hand box there and write teams before you press enter. And now lads, we've got everything we need to be able to make a dashboard, select a player, their opposition, and project the amount of rebounds they get for that match. So create a new worksheet and name it result. This will be our final dashboard in the model. And now I'm just going to do some formatting in this worksheet. So merge and center the cells B2 to D3, and then put the text player in here. Beside it, we'll select the player, but then below this, from B4 to D5, put the text opposition. Now from E2 to K3, fill the box there with the gray fill, and then do the same thing below it from E4 to K5. And then from L2 to M3, merge and center those cells. Here I'll put the text expected minutes played, or XMP. Beside this will be the minutes the player is expected to play in the match. And then below in L4, put the text home. And then merge and center the cells N2 to O3 along with N4 to O5, and then put borders around it. Now in cell E2, I'm going to create a drop-down list to choose a player from. So go into the Data tab, into the icon Data Validation, and a pop-up window will appear. I want to allow a list, and my source will be equals players, the range I named in the NBA per game player stats. That is the unique list of all the players in the NBA. So I can select the downwards arrow at the top right hand corner of the cell and select Giannis as the player I'm projecting the rebounds for. And I can do the same thing in cell E4 to get a list of the opposition teams Giannis may face. So allow a list, and then my range for that, or source, will be equals teams, and that's the range we named just a minute ago in the team names worksheet. So I'll select the Miami Heat as Giannis's opponent in this match. And once you do that, you can go up to cell N2, which is the expected minutes played. Now I'm going to put a formula in here to return Giannis's average minutes this season. However, you can always write over the top of this value if you expect him to play more or less that match. So the formula for this in cell N2 is equals VLOOKUP. My lookup value is E2, which is Giannis. I'm looking him up in the NBA player stats worksheet from B3 to AD3000. That's the entire data set to the left of the worksheet here that we brought in through a Power Query. And once you've selected that range, put the column index number as 7. If you go from column B and count 7 rows across, starting with player as 1, you'll get to the minutes played column in column H, and then the range lookup is false. So close that bracket, press enter, and Giannis has an average minutes played of 35. Again, you can always write over the top of this, and if I change this to his brother Thanasis, the expected minutes played will change too. So that's automatic now. And with the home cell in N4, I want this to be a yes or a no. So go up to data validation, allow a list, yes, comma, no. So we can choose one of two options, yes or no. When I press OK, I can then select yes from the drop-down list to have Antetokounmpo and the Bucks playing at home for this rebound forecast. Now I'm going to create headers for all the multiples that will influence the final formula to predict Antetokounmpo's rebounds. So in cell E7, put the text home advantage. Then in cell F7, average offensive rebounds for that player. Then in G7, average defensive rebounds. In H7, minute percentage. Below this will be the percentage of minutes Antetokounmpo plays based on his average. The player team ID in I7, in J7, the pace adjustment, in K7, the offensive rebound adjustment, and then next to it in L7, the defensive rebound adjustment. So now I'll work out the formula for E8, the home advantage now. I'm going to give players playing at home a 1% overall boost in their expected rebounds. So I'll use the formula if N4 equals yes, the game is at home, then return the square root function of 1.01. If not, return the reciprocal of this, applying a decrease of Antetokounmpo's expected rebounds of the square root of 1.01. So close the two brackets there and then decrease the number of decimals in the home advantage figure you get. So I'll put that as a percentage to 1 decimal place. Now time for the average offensive rebounds formula. That's just a simple VLOOKUP, searching up Giannis in cell E2 and then returning his average offensive rebounds from cells B3 to AD3000 in the NBA player stats worksheet. And that's in column 21 where the ORB stat is, that's offensive rebounds. So the column index number 21, range lookup as always false, close the bracket, press enter. And so Giannis averages 2.6 rebounds per game offensively, and then defensively, basically the same formula, except the column index number is going to be 22 instead of 21. So I'm looking up Giannis in the table array of B3 to AD3000 and then returning column 22 and then putting the range lookup as false. So I'll close the bracket on that, press enter. And Giannis has 8.7 defensive rebounds on average per game. Now, the minute percentage formula in H7, or in H8 rather, is going to be N2, the number of minutes Giannis is expected to play in this match, divided by the average amount of minutes he's been getting throughout the season. So that's VLOOKUP, searching up Giannis in E2. Within the B3 to AD3000 range, we're returning the column number 7, and then the range lookup is false. So this is the same formula performed in N2, so that if you leave this formula how it is and don't write over the top, you're going to get a figure of 1 or 100%. And I can, after converting it to a percentage, show you how you might change it. Say if I wanted to decrease Giannis's minutes or increase it to 40 rather, then his minute percentage would increase to 113%. So I'll put it back to the formula now so that figure stays at 100%. And then in cell I8 for the player team ID formula, I'm using a VLOOKUP function to return the 3-letter team ID of the selected player in E2. So my lookup value is E2. My table array this time though is AK3 to AL1000. I'm using the unique players list to return the unique player's current team. And the column index number will be 2, range lookup false, close that bracket, press enter, and Giannis currently plays for the Milwaukee Bucks, so his team ID is MIL. Now, before I do the formula in cell J8 for the pace adjustment, I'm going to run through the 3 data sets below that we need for the rest of the multiples. That is the pace, that's possessions per game for each team, the offensive rebound percentages for each team, and the defensive rebound percentages for each team. Those 3 data sets are available off the team rankings websites, and those 3 links are in the description of this video. So the pace adjustment formula is equal to the square root of a VLOOKUP function, and in that another VLOOKUP function where we're looking up I8 in the table array of A2 to C31 in the team names worksheet. And in this, I'm returning the third column, the team rankings names, and the range lookup is false, comma. Now the table array for the original VLOOKUP function is the pace worksheet. From B2 to C31, I'm returning column 2, the 2023 pace results for each team, comma, false. I'm then multiplying this by another VLOOKUP function within a VLOOKUP function. My lookup value is E4. The table array is B2 to C31 in the team names worksheet. And then I want to grab the second column of that, that's the team rankings names, and put in false, close the bracket there, comma. Now the table array for the original VLOOKUP function is the B2 to C31 range in the pace worksheet, comma 2, comma false. Close the bracket twice there, and then divide this by a VLOOKUP, and then a VLOOKUP within this, where the lookup value is E4 again. Table array B2 to C31 in team names. Grab the second column of that once you put in the range, which returns team rankings again. Column index number 2, false, comma, range lookup, pace worksheet B2 to C31, and then the column index number again is 2 because we're returning the values in column C here. And then close the bracket, press enter, and then we've got the pace adjustment. So here, Giannis's rebounds will be increased by 3% in the final formula because the pace of the game is expected to be higher than average for the Bucks, therefore more rebounds will be available. Now lads, go into the offensive rebound percentage data set in cell B33, put the text average, and then beside it in C33, I'm just finding the average of the values in column C. So that's average from C2 to C31, the average offensive rebound percentage across the league. Press enter on that. And then I'm going to do the same thing in the defensive rebound percentage data set. So go into that worksheet. And when you're there, it's the exact same formula. So in B33, put the text average, and then beside it in C33, use the average function to find the average of the range C3 to C31, which is the average defensive rebound percentage across the league. Press enter on that, and here my average is 75.47%. If I go back into the result worksheet, I can now use these values to calculate the offensive rebound adjustment for Giannis, and that formula is in brackets 1 minus, then in brackets again, VLOOKUP inside of a VLOOKUP, where my lookup value is E4. I'm searching for E4, which is Giannis's opposition in the Heat, within the range B2 to C31, and returning the column index number 2. Close that bracket, comma, my next table array is B2 to C31, this time in the defensive rebound percentage data set. Once you do that, I'm returning column 2 again, and then the range lookup of false. Close the bracket 3 times there, and then divide this by the average offensive rebound percentage in C33. And once you select that cell and press enter, go back into the result worksheet, and Giannis has an offensive rebound adjustment of 0.92, which means his expected offensive rebounds will be scaled down as Miami concede less offensive rebounds than the league average squad. So in L8 for the defensive rebound adjustment, it's a formula open bracket 1 minus a VLOOKUP within a VLOOKUP. I'm looking up E4 again, the Miami Heat, in the team names array of B2 to C31. The column index numbers 2 again, and the range lookup is false. Once you close that bracket and press comma, this time I'm going to the offensive rebound percentage data set, and the table array is again B2 to C31. The column index number is 2 and the range lookup is false. Close that with 3 brackets and then divide it by the average defensive rebounding percentage in cell C33. And once you press enter on that, Giannis's multiple is 1.03, meaning his expected defensive rebounds will be scaled upwards due to Miami's weaker than normal offensive rebounds conceded. Now in cells C11 to E11, type in the text expected rebounds on the offensive side, and then merge and center the cells F11 to G11, where we're going to come up with the formula to predict the player's expected offensive rebounds. Do the same thing in cells J11 to N11, but this time type in the expected rebounds defensively. And then from G13 to H13, make the same box, Here we're going to put expected rebounds in total, and the I13 to J13 merge cell will sum the expected offensive and defensive rebounds for your selected player. Now go up to cell F11 where we'll come up with the formula to project the offensive rebounds. This will be equal to E8, the home advantage, multiplied by F8, the average offensive rebounds, multiplied by the minute percentage in cell H8, multiplied again by the pace adjustment in J8, and then finally multiplied by K8, the offensive rebound adjustment. Press enter on that, put it to 2 decimal places, and Giannis has a predicted offensive rebound figure of 2.47. Now for the defensive rebounds, it's home advantage multiplied by the average defensive rebounds in G8, multiplied by the minute percentage, multiplied by the pace adjustment, and then finally multiplied by the defensive rebound adjustment in L8. So put that to 2 decimal places as well. And then to figure out the total rebounds in cell I13, you just sum F11 with M11. So the offensive plus the defensive rebounds, and that gives me 11.71 for Giannis. Now I've got to figure out the probability of Giannis going over or under a certain threshold. So in cells C15 to E15, I'll type the text select rebounds and then put that threshold in cell F15 to G15. I'll put the text over in J15 to K15 and under in J16 to K16. Then copy the formatting in these cells to L15 to O16 and then put borders around them, where you're going to then go into L16 to write the formula to find Giannis's probability of scoring under 12.5 rebounds. So that's equals if the mod function, where the number is F15 and the divisor is 1, is equal to 0, then return the Poisson distribution function, where x is F15, the number of rebounds selected, minus 1. The mean is the expected rebounds in I13 and the cumulative is true. So close the bracket there. If that's false, then return the Poisson distribution function again. This time x will just be F15, the mean will still be I13 and the cumulative true. So close the bracket twice after this, press enter, and you'll get a decimal representing Giannis's probability of scoring under 12.5 rebounds to 2 decimal places. That's 60.89%. And to find the over probability, well, that's just 1 minus cell L16. That's really easy. Press enter on that, and the sum of L15 and L16 should be 1. To find the decimal odds in cell N15, just divide 1 by L15 and do the same thing in the cell below, 1 divided by L16, and then select these two cells and put it into a currency format so you can see the intrinsic value of each market according to the model. Then select cells L15 to L16, put a color scale on it, rewarding the higher percentage as being highlighted in green, and then reverse that for N15 to N16 so that the higher odds actually get red, because that's a lesser likelihood of happening. Now if I change the selected rebounds in cell F15, you'll see the odds changing. Now this model's completely done, lads. Now you're able to select the player, their opposition, and perhaps if you wanted to adjust their expected minutes played, and this will produce the over-under probabilities in cells L15 to L16. So I've changed to 6.5 for Banchero. I can now go into the View tab and unselect the checkbox for grid lines. This will make the model a bit more presentable, and then up in the Data tab, if I want to refresh the live and updating data for Banchero as well as the opposition selected in cell E5, I need to press the refresh all icon. This will update the 4 power queries connected to the spreadsheet. That's the NBA per game player stats, the offensive and defensive rebound percentages, as well as the pace stats. Thanks for watching, lads. If you haven't already, make sure you sign up and become an official Excel lad so you can download this model and be able to learn how to model sports using Excel.